Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Insights Project Management Webinar. The topic for today, coaching other project managers. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please go ahead and type those questions into your question box.
Hey guys, I'm on
your GoToWebinar dashboard. We will try to answer all of your questions during the session, but if we can't, we'll make sure to keep those for our Part 2 session, and we'll make sure to address your questions then. Also, please note this webinar recording and slides will be available within the Project Insight community, and those will also be sent to you via email by tomorrow. Please be aware that all of our PM training sessions are valid for one PDU free of charge. However, you must be in attendance for the full session. I will email you your PDU certificate by the end of today, so please hold off on emailing me about your certificate until then. And for all other PDU information, please visit your PI community, type in PDU in the search, and you will find the PMI rules in an article called Webinars and PDUs. My name is Denise, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm on the marketing team here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. If you're not already familiar with Project Insight, we're a cloud-based project management solution. We work with two kinds of companies, those that are rapidly growing and need to scale the way they are managing their projects, and those who want greater visibility across their project portfolio, want more insight into the workloads of the resources, and want a better way to collaborate on projects among team members. If any of these sound familiar to you and you would like to learn more, please feel free to contact us via phone, email, or you can request your demo at projectinsight.net. I'd like to give a warm welcome today to our presenter, Diane Buckley. Diane is the CEO of Core Performance Concepts. CPC helps companies by training team members in project management, PMP preparation, leadership, and business analysis. Diane has an MBA and a PMP and over 30 years of experience in the industry. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, Denise. Hi, Brenda. Sorry I was a tad late, but welcome, everybody. Looking forward to having this conversation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm hearing some background noise.
Awesome. And joining Diane today will be Brenda Williams. For more than 20 years, Brenda has trained, coached, and guided project managers to become extraordinary leaders and exceptional communicators. She now runs the Academy for Leadership Communication, where she helps individuals and organizations make critical changes in their behavior, mindset, and skills by empowering peak performance through communication, collaboration, and innovation. Welcome, Brenda. How are you doing this morning? Thank you so much for joining us.
Doing well, Denise. Thank you for the introduction. Diane, are you moving around?
Are you getting a lot of background noise with this?
Yeah, we hear it's like someone's walking through a wind tunnel.
All right, give me one.
Okay. So Denise, we can move forward, and I'll take it till Diane comes back on. Hello? I'm not hearing anybody. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
hey, Brenda, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, I think that's better.
Yes. It's always those little microphones on those computers that drive us nuts, right?
Okay, good. So I think, Denise, you're going to turn it over to Diane?
Yep, I got it. I'm all good. All right, so how's everybody doing today, Brenda? Denise, everybody doing good?
Doing great. Lovely
Excellent.
Sunny day in California.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a bit about coaching and managing project managers. We've spent several years now talking about the various skills we need to be excellent project managers. But today we're going to leverage Brenda's experience in coaching and talk a bit about how do you get the most out of your people, because some of you are probably managing project managers. Some of you want to move to the point where you are managing project managers. And, so we're going to talk a bit about how do you get the best out of people. So I'm excited to work on that today. If I can find the right button to go down, there we are. Excellent.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Diane, that these skills and tools can be learned even if you're not directly leading or managing a person. We're really always leading and managing people around us. We're trying to get stakeholders to do things, our peers, co-workers, even our children. So we always are trying to influence somebody and help coach and guide them in their knowledge. So it really can be applied in just about all facets.
You are absolutely right, Brenda, and I was thinking of that, and you articulated exactly what I was thinking. So, and it really comes down to this epiphany that I had many years ago. A good friend of mine told me I was frustrated with dealing with a person, and he looks at me and he goes, Diane, people don't do what they don't want to do. And, it was one of those aha moments for me where I said, I have to think about much more about what do people want to do, how are they, and why do people not want to do things? So is it because they don't know how? Is it because they don't like to do things? Is it they've tried it and they're not good at it? I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people don't do things, and that's our job as a manager to really kind of figure out what is it that makes that person tick, and how can we get them more productive in the organization. And having been a project manager for 30 plus years, and Brenda's coached project managers for about the same amount of time, right? Where project managers tend to struggle, I see they tend to struggle in a couple different areas. One is they struggle with closing projects. Many of you were on our session last month and the month before. We're talking about how do you get projects to closure. It was a great conversation, lots of questions, and the thing I learned out of that session was how many of you have the same problem. And if I'm managing project managers, are we being too nice and not bringing projects to closure? How are we thinking through that? So I see project managers struggling with closing projects. I see project managers struggling with just managing budgets. That's not necessarily, well, it's definitely not the easiest thing to do when you talk about the triple constraint, when you talk about time, quality, and cost. Cost is the hardest thing to manage because anytime you have an issue, you're bringing in resources, you're adding to the cost of that project. So managing budgets is very hard for people to do. Another area that they struggle with is we struggle with delivering on the expected value on the project. A lot of times we deliver on the things we're supposed to deliver on, the deliverables. We get those taken care of. But the real value of successful project managers is, do they understand that their project being delivered, how it benefits the organization? What's that real value of that project? I see people struggling on that. I also, see people get so tactical and they think if I follow the PMBOK guide and I do my kickoff meetings and I do my risk planning and if I do my communication planning and I do my schedule, everything just works out. Well, that's not true. There is a lot of soft skills, that a person like a Brenda can help you build. I mean, those soft skills are critical for people getting away from the tactical mindset and delivering on value. And then finally, I see a lot of struggles with people making decisions. And there's a lot of reasons why people struggle with decisions. It could be organizational, where they don't feel empowered to do that. It could just be their personality, where, they're more a consensus kind of person and they need to get everybody on the same page and other people making the decisions. You know, we can't move projects forward if we're not getting decisions done. They can be done in many ways, but we can't move projects forward without making decisions. So I'm opening up any other areas where we see our project, ourselves as project managers or other project managers struggle. And I'm open to you guys throwing some comments into the question box, and Denise, and let us know if you see anything interesting, okay?
And while we're waiting for that, I'll just add a couple things to that, because I'm actually working with someone right now on the value and how to sell the value. And I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. People get stuck in the weeds of delivering, you know, the project, and they forget about understanding the people. Who each individual we work with thinks differently and makes those decisions in a unique way. And so when you learn how to be emotionally intelligent and socially aware, you can recognize that each person you're working with on a project operates and thinks in a unique way. So understanding where they're coming from, how comfortable they are, what their buy-in is like, is the first step. And then the second one is like showing them the value, like you said. Well, how do you show the value? You have to find out what they're interested in, what their needs are, what their goals are. How will it make their life easier, their job easier? How will it benefit them as well as the organization? So any areas that you can find where you can almost become a little mini salesperson and selling the benefits of this project is going to get people more excited and more engaged to want to deliver.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, I wanted to start the conversation with, you know, do you understand, you know, your people? So again, this whole session is talking about how do you coach project managers, and we all can use coaching, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And you know, when you are managing a set of project managers, you know, you can sit here and stereotype, and I know that I am an ENTJ, you know, and a lot of project managers tend to be that particular personality style, and this is a Myers-Briggs study. But there are definitely project managers in other quadrants of this kind of style. And, you know, I know a person that she is that process-oriented individual, and she does great for certain types of projects. And you just need to understand the different personality styles that are out there and what your team is and what their strengths are. So if I'm looking at somebody that is an ENTJ, I know that they're probably not afraid to make decisions. However, I also know that that person with a strong personality could squash other people's opinions. So I, as a manager, might need to coach that person on how not to do that, how to make sure that they're gaining getting all the information they can from their customer or from their team members, so that they are making good decisions, not just making decisions because they're not afraid to make decisions. What do you think about that, Brenda?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And the more you can learn the personality styles of the people you work with and how they function, how they think, what's important to them, the more successful you will become. I mean, some people are very analytical and they need more data and they need more time to think about it. Their decisions are going to be a little slower. So whoever's on your team, spending a little more time with that person, giving them more data, knowing that you got to, you know, drip on them a little bit more, maybe meet with them more often, giving them more information, keeping them up to date so they have a comfort zone of where they're at. And then there's others that move. There's others that move at warp speed, and trying some of us, not me, because I'm one of those warp speed people. But for everybody else, they need to try to speed it up a little bit, or they lose my attention.
Absolutely. So you have to think about your team, and don't expect. And I see this all the time. I think people when they hire people, they expect them all to be the same. They may not articulate it in that way, but I see the conversation happen. Well, you know, they're not our best person because they're not like Sue. And, you know what, maybe we don't need 10 Sues. Maybe we need a Sue and a John with different personalities and different skill sets and different, abilities to pair them up with the right partners and the right group of team members. And that could be your customers as well. So what I like to say is I look for somebody that is not necessarily their tactical skills. I look for people that have these kinds of traits. Somebody that, wants to complete the tasks that they've committed to. Somebody that executes on those tasks. Somebody that knows how to have their list of things to do and they get those things done. I also want somebody that knows what's important to the organization and is truly, truly interested in the overall success of the organization. And that comes in a couple different ways. That comes in, are they curious with regard to how the company makes money? Are they interested in how they contribute to the overall success of the organization? Do they ask about those kinds of things? I can see different types of personalities meet both of those criteria. And then the third thing, I love people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and volunteer and, have that kind of positive attitude toward, let's just get this done. And then fourth, having the sense of wanting, of a desire to deliver a quality product, whatever that product is. But you have to recognize what the right level of quality is. So when I look at people, I'm for hiring or for coaching or the right fit for a company, I'm usually looking at things like these 4 things rather than the tactical skills they bring to the table. Because a lot of that stuff can be learned.
And sometimes people have good intentions, but they're so busy and so overloaded, you slip to the bottom of that priority list. So how do you motivate them to get them to move you to the top of the list?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it really does start with yourself. And for this particular webinar, I wanted to kind of set the stage. Brenda is an executive coach. I'm going to have her kind of walk us through some strategies and some approaches to really coaching people. And very interested in hearing what you guys have to say about types of people that you work with and what actually motivates them. Do you guys want to say something, Denise?
Denise, any comments or questions coming in on what we've said so far?
Yes, here's a question for you. How do you deal with a fire-ice type of relationship as a manager? And what about if you're one of them?
Fire-ice type of person, so kind of like an oil and water person that your personalities just don't mesh. If that's the definition, I'll assume that's the definition, and whoever said it can correct us. But the fact that you recognize that it's fire and ice is really the first step. As this slide says, it's just really first assess yourself, know who you are, and then once you know who you are, and I know Brenda's done a whole session on emotional intelligence that I encourage everybody to take. Then you can actually truly objectively assess others. Recognize who you are. We don't want to judge people based on how well they mesh or don't mesh with us, but we have to recognize what our differences are and then work towards working with those differences. So I'm going to hand it over to Brenda here. Brenda, do you want me to just kind of keep presentation up?
Yeah, so what I would add on to that is we can't expect other people to change. People only change if they want to. So what we have to do is take responsibility for how we respond to those individuals. And I can tell you, almost everybody I've ever worked with in 20 years in the business world and in coaching will have someone on their team that has a fire and ice relationship. We think differently. We're all different human beings. We have different personality styles, different temperaments, and different ways that we like to do things. And so there's always going to be someone that you have to interface with where the communication style needs to be modified, how you approach them. And when people are more like us, we tend to get along easier. Life flows along, and it gets, things get done a little easier. But when someone's very different, you've got to modify your approach. Did you have something to add to that, Diane?
I was just agreeing with you, Brenda.
Okay.
You know, because we're like beings. However, there are differences. And we tend to think very much alike, and it makes it easy. But there are times. I mean, I was just on several phone calls over the last several months where there's one point that two people just do not see eye to eye on, and every time that conversation comes up, you can just see where each is trying to make their point and the other one is just not agreeing with it. So sometimes it's okay to agree to disagree. My husband says that to me all the time. Sometimes it's okay to agree to disagree. You can't get past it if you don't. And if every single time you bring up the same issue and you argue the same point, that doesn't give us any progress. So we really need to recognize those differences, and I look at it from being mature about it is agree to disagree, and then move on to other things.
Yeah, and it's not always going to be your way, my way. It's got to be compromised when you're working in a team sometimes. So that's Absolutely. Why I wanted to share the triggers with you, because it's inevitable that there'll be a difference of opinion somewhere along the way. So how do you respond to that? Most people are not, oh, no problem, let's do it your way, without any conversation or any frustration. So what I want you to do for our audience out there is to think about what are your triggers and your hot buttons. Like for me, I'm not very patient. So if I don't get results quick enough, it'll start wearing on me. And so understanding that, I know that I have to push the pause button when that's happening, and I need to take a deep breath, and I need to reposition and figure out what can I do differently internally inside my own head to have more patience first and foremost, but what can I do most effectively to work with that person in a different way to speed things up. So I'm going to share a tool with you today that I use in my coaching practice, and I recommend that you use it over the next few weeks to journal around your thinking and be aware of your emotions when you're dealing with people that you're having some challenges with. And so the first question is, how do you respond to people that aren't getting on the bandwagon? Are you the type that gets, stays enthusiastic about that? Are you still energetic and excited every time you talk to them? Most of the people I coach do not show up that way. After they've asked someone over and over again, they start taking things personally. They're not responding to me. They start judging. We do these things as human nature. So being consciously aware of how is that changing the dynamics of my relationship with that person. And how long can you play nice before you start to react to it? Mm-hmm. And that's a different answer for all of us. Some people, it might be by the third phone call, we're pretty upset. And others realize this is just part of the game and it's ongoing, and they'll get out of their seat and walk by that person's office with a big smile like nothing ever happened. So you might be in the middle of that as well. But really understanding what stresses you out and what keeps you energetic when you're working with these people. And how are you showing up on the emotional scale through your thoughts?
Absolutely, and I can picture this in a couple different ways. I can picture what you're saying, Brenda, is, let's say I'm working with a peer, and that peer is not in agreement, and how are we responding to each other as a peer and getting on the bandwagon. But there's also another scenario where you're managing others and your subordinates aren't getting on the bandwagon, and you're trying to figure out how to get them moving that way. Or the third scenario would be you're watching some of your subordinates interact with each other, or let's say your project managers interacting with team members, and they're not getting on the bandwagon together. How do you coach them through that to recognize that, here's something that you can do to help you work with those team members better? because I can see that you guys are not on the same bandwagon together. So I see like 3 different ways to kind of leverage what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, exactly. And it can even be your boss. I've had people say, what if it's my boss? So it goes back to understanding all of those individuals. You know, once you know how you're showing up, you've got to know what makes them tick and what would get them excited and engaged and enthusiastic. You know, I was coaching someone the other day who said, I can never get my boss to sit down and talk to me. He's always multitasking and really busy, and I can barely get a moment of his time. So it's taking a moment to stop and see how you're responding to that and taking a new approach. What's a different approach you can take? So some of my recommendations were, you know, get them to coffee, get them to lunch, or just catch them walking in the hall. Ask them when you can have, you know, 5 minutes with undivided attention, and ask for it. Sometimes you have to ask for what you want.
Great point.
Are you ready for the next slide?
I can certainly do that.
There we go. So this is a tool that I use, and I ask my clients to journal around this. And it is a real aha moment when we do coaching using this tool, because they start to see a pattern. They see reoccurring themes and patterns in the types of people that will help them to feel enthusiastic and excited, the people that they enjoy, and then they'll see the people that might frustrate them or challenge them in some way. And so understanding what those triggers are, what is the situation that occurred you to feel that way? Is it, hey, when I walk into Sally's office, she's really friendly and bubbly, and that's, you know, I feel warm and welcome when I go to talk to her, and that's a positive thing. But when you walk into Joe's office, and Joe is, you know, more of a engineer mentality, introvert, he's not very warm and friendly, sometimes he's multitasking, you feel like he won't give you the time of day, and we start making these interpretations and taking things personally in our heads. And so a trigger would be when I walk into Joe's office, he's multitasking and he doesn't believe in me, and I feel frustrated. Actually, I get angry over it. And when you start writing down these little triggers about what's going on, over a period of time you can determine what they are. So you can be proactive and you can challenge your thoughts. So for example, the one I just used with Joe might be multitasking because he's got a million things on his plate, and for him it's the norm. It's nothing personal. He doesn't mean to be rude. He doesn't even recognize that it's being rude, and it's really just the way Joe shows up. So when we react to that and we have that trigger in us that Joe doesn't like me, or Joe's, you know, not part of the team, we start taking these things personal, and we make it personal when it may not be. So the triggers are extremely crucial to determine what are they for me that cause any types of negative emotion. And the reason I say negative is if you're happy and joyful, you know, you don't need a lot of help with that. But it is good to recognize who are the people that I enjoy and what are they doing differently. If you look at that with curiosity, it's really fascinating. Because if you're an introvert and you're that person that multitasks, Joe's approach won't bother you at all. But if you're more of an extrovert that likes to sit and have coffee and talk about your weekend, and Joe won't give you the time of day, we tend to think it's us versus them, versus recognizing they're just different human beings and they show up differently. So noticing what you feel in your body. I was noticing the other day when I was impatient about something, I could feel the tension in my shoulders. I could feel it coming. And that's where I hold my tension, which means I have to get a lot of massages and cupping. But it does affect our health. So this is important stuff to really recognize what's happening in your body with that stress that we don't recognize in many cases. Then you'd have to look at your self-talk, like I said just a moment ago. Well, how are you interpreting what just happened? Are you taking it personal? Are you starting to judge? We start creating these stories in our head. Maybe he doesn't like me. He's not engaged. He doesn't care about this project. He's not on the bandwagon. And we start creating these stories that will cause us to react. And so maybe we don't enjoy that person as much, so we won't go see them as much. We won't include them in some of the meetings or the events. and then you start to alienate yourself. And so as you go through this process, you start to recognize how you're showing up makes all the difference. Because if you never had that thought in the first place, you wouldn't take it personally, and you would just find a new way to approach Joe. So as you move to the right, this is a real uncovering experience of what's happening with your emotional intelligence and responding to people and situations. So what's your reaction when that happens? Some of us are avoiders, stuffers. Some of us will walk away, try not to deal with that person. We'll go home and talk about it all evening and be angry and upset. So how do you feel afterwards? What's the damage that's done? In that case, you don't have a solid relationship with that person. And I bet that everybody on the phone can think of one person that they've had some of this negative self-talk with, that they work with, that gets under your skin.
Oh, absolutely, Brenda. Absolutely. We all do. You know, we all do. Probably, hopefully not too many, but yeah, I can see a couple people.
Are they typing in some notes? Anything fun you want to share? So what's a better response? A better response is to take the time to take a step back and look at what are these triggers? How are they showing up? What is my self-talk? How am I responding? And what would be a better response? So I'm going to ask you to challenge your thinking, challenge your perspectives about that person. And I coach so many different people, and I hear so many stories about human beings and the challenges that we have communicating with each other. And in many, many times, that person is totally engaged and very interested, but the communication is not happening appropriately. Connecting with that person, finding a common bond, and making the effort to really connect and engage with them in a different way, taking a unique approach that will work for their personality style and their communication style. And when you start to modify your approach and how you interact with those people, everything will change around you. I see it happen all the time when I'm coaching people on how to communicate in these areas.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you know, this is great, Brenda, because like I said earlier, I can see this being used in many different ways, and really kind of thinking about if you practice this yourself on how you react to individuals, you can then share this with others and help them through. And I look at project managers. Project managers are business owners. They have to deal with a lot of different people. They have to deal with a lot of different personalities. You know, you have to be a chameleon to understand how to communicate to various people. I mean, that's why we do our communication plan, is because we recognize that everybody needs to be communicated differently. So what you're sharing here is just, you know, it's kind of that next layer down is, you know, when you are communicating, what are you feeling? How are you getting your point across? How are you responding to somebody else's reaction? You know, when you get a customer that says something that, you know, is just the customer's frustrated, how are you taking that? So these are things that if you're managing project managers, you have to recognize that they have to be able to process the information like Brenda's explaining here.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on because we're going to talk about some coaching,
yes.
Coaching versus consulting. So let's chat for a moment about the differences. And anybody that has some information they want to share on what's worked well for them, I'm very open to sharing your thoughts with the audience. But what I've seen in the coaching versus consulting world, I wear two hats. And in the coaching world, you're really asking thought-provoking questions. You're helping guide people to their own conclusions. And so you got to be really good at active listening and being able to ask great open-ended questions, and that takes practice. Now, when you're consulting, you're kind of telling them, you know, you're mentoring, you're guiding, you're teaching them how to do something. And so often we're busy and we will jump to consulting versus coaching. So I want to ask you, which do you think, on the next slide, is a better approach? Coaching, when do you want to use coaching and when's that convenient, versus when would you want to do consulting? So if you could type your answers into the chat box, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'll make a comment here for a second, and then Denise can kind of share one of the questions. I like what you said, Brenda, about, coaching is about listening. I see a lot of people say, if they're managing somebody or they're trying to coach somebody and the person's having difficulty with a particular concept, they say, oh, let me do it, and that's not helpful. That's not coaching. That's kind of taking ownership of it and allowing the person to relinquish ownership. Coaching to me really is about helping people do for themselves.
Yeah, and being willing to have the patience to let them go
Absolutely.
run with something. And being willing to take a step back and see, in some cases, can they do it appropriately? And
it might take a couple tries.
Yeah, so you have to have patience, and a lot of the driver, controller, achiever personalities that I work with will take more on their plate and do it themselves because A, they don't have the patience to wait, B, they don't want to get it done wrong, and C, they question whether or not the person has the capability. And then they wear the weight of the world on their shoulders. So it's very important to recognize where you stand in this game, because you will always be doing it if you don't coach somebody else and teach other people. And with the younger generations coming into the workplace, they need to be coached. They need to be consulted as well, but in many cases they need to be coached so that they can buy in, they can learn, and they can discover, and they get more excited and engaged when they are doing that versus you just telling them and micromanaging them.
Absolutely. So Denise, any comments from the audience?
Oh, yes. Let's see. Coach when working with a team and consult when working with peers. And then we have Pam who says coaching is used when you want to make a long-term investment in a person.
I like that one. I'm not sure I agree with the one prior to that, Denise, where it's like consulting is with your peers and coaching is with your team. I think Brenda, I love your input. I think coaching and consulting is a tool that you use at an appropriate time, not necessarily with a particular set of people.
Absolutely, I would agree, Diane. I think that you just have to determine the situation and the person. And some of my answers would be, not everybody is open to being coached. So if you have someone you're working with that's been there 25 years and they know it all, it might be harder to coach them.
Here's a good question for you ladies.
Yes.
What about coaching versus mentoring?
Mentoring is really a form of teaching. Usually when people are mentoring, they're telling people about their wisdom, how they've approached things in the past, their recommendations, their suggestions. When you're in a true coaching mode, you're not telling people how to do things. You're guiding them to their own conclusions by asking questions. And it makes a big difference, especially if you're working with someone who has a strong personality, or even with your children. Just think about it. A good example is when you tell your children to do something, what do they normally do? Usually the complete opposite, right? So instead of telling them, asking them the right questions to get them to think about the pros, the cons, the repercussions, get them to start thinking about the situation. So you plant the seeds for them to go mull it over. And again, that's why you can't always do coaching. You might need immediate results. You might need immediate action. So you got to determine when is it appropriate that I have the time to let this person go discover and learn through experience versus this needs to be done right now. It needs to be done right. We got this project says due in a week. We don't have time for coaching. But taking a pulse on who are the people that are willing to be coached, who are the people that it would benefit you to be coached so that they can take more off of your plate or so that they can get more done in the future. Okay? So unless you have anything to add, Denise, we'll move to the next one. And these are pretty simple, straightforward little tips just to remember, because we all get busy and we forget to do these things. Ask yourself, when's the last time I walked around the office and said thank you to somebody? I have a client of mine doing the 5 appreciation languages in the workplace, which is a great little tool to do a book club around to get people talking about why we appreciate each other and how we like to be showed appreciation. So when you understand people and you trust each other and you're warm and you're friendly, and when you have an honest team, that's an ideal environment to work in, and it makes things a whole lot easier. So if you don't have that environment, people are not getting along as well, they're not collaborating as effectively, and there might be some blaming and finger pointing going on. So which side of the fence would you rather be on? Most people would agree they want the they want to be in a place where people care about each other, they're collaborative, they're open to positive conflict and new ideas and creativity, and they trust each other and respect each other enough to share their ideas and their opinions. But it goes with the appreciation, it goes with understanding people and what's important to them. So I ask you, when's the last time you walked around the office with a cup of coffee and just built rapport with people and told them how much you appreciate them?
One of the things that I've done when you go and study about what makes an engaged workforce, that's another topic out there that we hear a lot about, and really the main component of having an engaged workforce is having that trust or that sense of appreciation.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And we forget to do that. We get so busy, we're so rushed and so much on our plate. Sometimes we just expect. I've had a client say, I just expect that they'll do their job. They should just do their job. Well, they're going to do their job a whole lot better and a whole lot easier if they feel appreciated, respected, wanted, needed. It's just
absolutely
that's important.
Absolutely.
So next slide. I know we're going to be running out of time, so I'm going to try to get through mine so you have a few minutes to talk about yours as well. So give them some problem-solving tools. If you want to take time to let them learn on their own, you can give them some problem-solving tools. Maybe give them a specific little piece of a project and ask them to look at the various options, the pros, the cons. Ask them for their recommendations and to identify different approaches. So that way you can see, how do they do when you start coaching them? Are they learning? Are they catching on? Is your approach working? And then asking the right questions. Does this make sense? Do you understand the direction, what I'm asking? And when you come back together, it's asking really good questions, seeing how they went through the process. And the most important and sometimes the most challenging is staying open-minded, because part of coaching is not expecting them to do it exactly the way you or I would do it. It's being open to new approaches and new ideas and letting the reins loose a little bit and thinking about the outcome in the end.
And that's a good point, Brenda, because one of the things I see with managing a lot of project managers, many of them are dealing with very unique clients. And, I look at them as they should have the pulse of that client better than I do. So if they're having a problem with a particular client or a project that they're working on, I'm trying to ask them, what do you think the sense is from the customer's perspective? They need to understand what each of the team members' perspective and share with me what that is so that we can kind of come up with a solution versus me saying, well, I've done it this way, so try this. Every project is unique, and if you're mentoring or you're coaching project managers, you have to have them communicate to you what the situation is clearly so that you can at least guide them in the right direction.
Very true, very true. So if you're mentoring, someone asked about mentoring, that's more of a guiding and teaching and sharing your wisdom. So finding ways to introduce them to other people, making those connections, getting them more involved and engaged in these meetings, asking them what they learned, what their takeaways were, what were they confused about. Finding other people that will help you mentor as well. Talking about their future. Now, Diane mentioned earlier, people don't do what they don't like. So sometimes we have people in the wrong role, and they're not excited and they're not engaged. So if you're working with a team of people, finding out what people love, what are their strengths, you know, and sometimes we need to get different types of people involved on the team so you can blend their strengths and get them to work together and play off of each other's greatness. Many times we have people on a team that, you know, maybe they just don't have the knowledge, they're not comfortable, maybe they're checked out, they're frustrated, really knowing where they're coming from so that you can blend the team appropriately. You can find the right people to work on your team, you know, and find interesting opportunities for that person. People that will enjoy being coached are the people that are doing something they want to learn, that they're excited about, that they're engaged in. So if you can figure that out as you're going through your projects and assign the people the appropriate tasks, that is how you're going to have an easier flow in your projects. And you're going to be able to coach, mentor, and consult with the people in the appropriate way because they're more involved, they're more open because they're doing something they actually enjoy.
Or even the types of projects they're working on. You know, I have one project manager, she loves the small projects. She just has a process and she pounds them out. You know, she doesn't want the large, complex projects, and that's okay. You know, there's a role for her and there's enough work for her, and we can satisfy that desire.
And that's good that you're able to move that around. Now, I know there's some people out there thinking, well, what if I'm stuck with a project team and I can't change anybody's role? Because I know there's some of you thinking that. Then it goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's about the relationships. And is it possible that we're always going to work on projects we love, you know, every single day?
Never.
Usually there's going to be some things we have to do that we don't enjoy. So how do you make that environment a little more fun, a little more engaging, so that at least if you got to work through that on a daily basis for the next 6 months, you can find a way to make it a little more enjoyable. You know, take the time to do team building meetings, get people to lunch, coffee, have some fun with them, implement some fun things you can do in your meetings. Take some time to go see a comedian together and build that rapport. So at least as a team you enjoy working together and people are more motivated to be part of the team and to deliver.
Excellent.
So the most important thing is to look at your skills around coaching and consulting. Get a pulse on how you're doing. And in many cases, I find that people think they're doing a great job, but when you start asking the perspective of others and you do assessments and really look a little deeper, most people will give you some different input. So ask yourself, how am I doing at coaching and consulting? Do I have the right skills? Am I open to letting people make mistakes along the way? And am I encouraging those mistakes when it happens and looking at it as an opportunity? For some of us, that's easier said than done. And so we have to be conscientious of that, because I have a client that I've been doing leadership training for a few years, and they've got people out there that are afraid to make mistakes because they've been slapped upside the head a few times. So when you squash that creativity, people will stop trying. They're just going to be the status quo. You know, they're not going to be 200% engaged. So ask yourself, am I that person that can sit back and let someone make a mistake and look at it as a learning opportunity? How am I approaching them when that happens? And be conscientious of that next time that happens. Go through that little trigger tool that I shared with you and discover, am I inspiring people to step outside of their comfort zone, to take chance, to take risk, and to go for it? Or am I kind of squashing that, and because of that, I'm not getting as much support, and I'm taking more of the weight of the work on my shoulders? So as many of you on the call know, as a coach, I teach these skills, so feel free to reach out to me if you want to master the art of emotional intelligence and communication. So the mindset around the coach, I'm going to leave you with this to think about, is really to help the employee reach their potential, right? And it's important to be clear on what the needs are, spending time with them, getting progress status reports, and even attaching it to SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable results with a timeline. Because you want to see are they really capable of doing this. And then when you have those SMART goals, you can know what they delivered, what they didn't. Did they step up to the plate? Did they give it a good try? And you can get a real good pulse on who are the people that are going to be coachable and who are the people that, you know, maybe you don't want to spend as much time trying to coach. Maybe those you have to take a different approach with them.
Right. Absolutely. And it is a trial and error, approach. And again, we'll go back to what we said earlier, is you have to assess yourself first. And I like the comment you made on the last slide about what are we saying? Are we squashing their enthusiasm? I hear that a lot in new managers in particular, where that manager has been elevated to the next level, and they basically tell people in their team that, well, that's not how I've done it, and you're doing it wrong, and you start saying words like that, you're going to get people to not want to share anymore. You really have to pay attention to the words you use and whether or not those words and those questions are enlightening somebody to try harder, or are you squashing their enthusiasm?
And that's a very good point, Diane, because I actually have a list of words in front of me, and so often we don't even know the words we're using. Because if we're thinking frustrating thoughts, we use words without even recognizing we're using them. So try to pay attention to some of the helpful words, which are we, please, thank you, understanding them. Now, when you use words like absolutes that are you must, we never, this is the problem, this costs us, those can be perceived as negative words, and it's very, very important to be consciously aware of the words you're using.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we want is people on our teams doing what they love to do. And so we'll kind of bring some closure to the session, because I know we're almost out of time, and this has been a great conversation, and I'm sure we have a million questions. And those, Brenda and I will be back in 2 weeks to answer a lot of those. But Denise, were you going to ask something?
No, you're good.
Okie dokie. So just to kind of summarize some of the mistakes we make as managers, especially if we're managing project managers, are we overworking our folks? Are we not recognizing their contribution and rewarding good work? Or do we care? Do people perceive us that we care? Do they think that we honor or not honor the commitments to them? There's a lot of companies out there that, promise things and don't deliver, and if you are one of those companies, then you need to look hard about why people are not satisfied in their roles. So there's a lot of things we make mistakes on as managers that, as part of this session, I want you to be really thinking about. Think about how you act first. So this whole session is not about what you need to do to get people to do what they don't want to do. It's really, how are you coming to the table to help and coach and mentor and teach your team to be successful. Don't fall into the traps that many managers fall into. One of the things that you should be doing, or several of the things that you should be doing, and what we consider leading an organization, is your job is to help eliminate the noise. Your job is to help people be successful, but through coaching and mentoring and supporting them. You probably have heard the term of the servant leader. Basically that means that as you go up in the ladder, your job is to help your subordinates succeed. If you can't help your subordinates succeed, it's going to all end up on your shoulders. So there really is an incentive for us to do that. And as we grow in our organizations and start managing other project managers, you have to change that mindset. It's not your way or the highway. And everything needs to be aligned. Are we compensating our people in alignment with what our organizational goals are? Do the people in our team understand what those organizational goals are? Going back to earlier in the session, I want people on my team that understand where the company's going and want to contribute. And my job is to help them see how they affect that bottom line and how they can succeed by performing in a certain way and then rolling up your sleeves and doing the job. And us as managers need to help and coach them in being successful. And then our final thought. Go ahead, Brenda.
I couldn't have said that better, Diane.
Good summary, right?
Great.
And then, you have a responsibility. You have to make sure you are happy with what you're doing, because if you don't show up well, your team's not going to show up well. Understand who you are, take some assessments, work with Brenda, understand who you are, and be honest about your own skills and how you fit the role that you're supposed to play. And then, make sure you're working with your team. And, ask the team if they're happy with what they're doing. What are their needs and their desires? And, do they appear to have trust in you? These are all things you've got to be really paying attention to be the best leader you can possibly be. Any comments to that, Brenda?
No, I think you've said it all. I think I'd like to take some, do we have any time? I don't think we have time to take questions. I wanted to try and answer questions.
Let's take one. Let's take one, and we'll have lots of questions to talk about in the next session for sure.
Yeah, and that leads us to the next session, which is in a few weeks. So if we take all of the questions, anybody that's still out there, type all your questions into the chat box, because we're going to gear the next webinar towards your questions so we can answer all of them.
So Denise, do we have any good one we want to hit right now before we close?
Is coaching, training, or facilitating and supporting, or is it both?
Coaching, again, is separate from training and facilitating. Coaching is when you wear a true coach hat. Coaching is asking open-ended, thought-provoking questions, guiding people to their own conclusions. So, for example, say you're working on a project. Bob, what do you think of the project deliverable? What do you think of the timeline? How do you think we could approach this? What are some of the things we could do that would be effective? How can I support you? Everything needs to be in an open-ended question, so you're gathering information, you're understanding their opinions, their ideas, their thoughts. Are they bought into the project? So when you are wearing a true coaching hat, it's a lot of questions. When you're mentoring and consulting, you're giving more information. You're teaching.
Excellent. All right. Well, this has been great, Brenda. I really appreciate it. We would definitely keep adding your questions in there, folks, for our next session. We're looking forward to that. Again, what our goal here is to help you manage other project managers better through coaching skills, mentoring skills, training skills. What Brenda and I would love to do is help you really succeed as an organization, and especially if you're being elevated in your role to manage other project managers, we want to help you. So please send us your questions, and we will see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you, ladies.
And anybody that wants to reach out to me, you can email me directly at Brenda Williams at Academy FLC, and that's Academy, and the FLC stands for Leadership Communication.
Thank you, Brenda. And yes, as they were saying, your upcoming webinar in 2 weeks, Diane and Brenda will come back to answer all these great questions we have today. So that's coming up November 23rd. If you haven't already registered for that, I encourage you to do so right after this webinar. We do have a special promotion brought to you by Core Performance Concepts. If you'd like to continue improving your project management skills, they're offering a 10% discount for online courses. So go ahead and check them out today. And I will go ahead and copy that link into your chat box. As far as your PDU, you will automatically receive your PDU certificate via email by the end of today. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything else I can help you with, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. You will earn a 1 PDU per webinar attended. And to register your PDU, you will log on to pmi.org as a member of PMI, select course or training, and fill out all the information below, which will also be available within your PDU certificate. For those of you on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @Project Insight. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest in PI news. In our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next project management training, IT methodology, and agile leadership or product training. These are all completely free, so go ahead and check out our webinar calendar and register for as many as you'd like. And that's all we have for you today. So until then, we'd like to thank Diane and Brenda, as usual, for a great session, a lot of great information. And we look forward to having you ladies in 2 weeks, and of course, having all of our audience here back on to get all these questions answered, all these great comments. So have a good one, guys, and we will see you then.
Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Denise. Bye, everybody.
Bye.